at this time, I'm going to welcome Kimber Lanning with Local First Arizona. Kimber is an entrepreneur and economic specialist who works to cultivate vibrant, sustainable communities and inspire a higher quality of life throughout Arizona. Lanning is actively involved in forecasting, economic self-reliance, regional planning, cultural diversity, and responsible growth in the greater Phoenix area. She is founder and executive director of Local First Arizona, a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising public awareness of the positive economic and environmental impacts of supporting locally owned businesses. So with that, I'd like to welcome Kimber up here.
Thank you all so much for having me. This is a lovely facility, and thank you, Vice Mayor, for filling me in on the history of this area. It's great to meet somebody who's been here as long as you have. How many people in the room have lived here longer than 10 years? How about 20? You can just leave your hand up. 30? All right. Okay, that's great. So I got 44. I've got 44 in the Arizona area. So, do I need to point this in any particular area? Okay. How many of you are at all familiar with Local First Arizona? A handful. Okay. So I founded Local First Arizona in 2003, largely for two different reasons, and I'm going to talk to you a lot about those as we go through this discussion today. The first one really being, I felt that we had too many bright young people leaving Arizona. My background is that I'm a small business owner. I own a music store that I've had for 25, going on 26 years, and I own an art gallery, which meant that I was surrounded by bright young people, both high school and college students, and many of them were leaving Arizona. And I thought, why do I feel connected to this place and other people don't? And I thought that was really interesting. And I thought we were not focusing on retaining those individuals here. The second reason that I started this was, as a small business owner, I became very frustrated with the large subsidies that were being given to large corporate big box and or national chain restaurants. I'm a strong believer in free markets, and I believe that businesses should be allowed to compete on a level playing field. And so those were the two main reasons that I started Local First Arizona. And then I found out, after I started the organization, there was a study that had just been done in Austin, Texas, that showed this very simple fact, that for $100 spent in a local business, 45 of those dollars stay and recirculate in the community. For the same $100 spent in any national chain, only $13 remains. So we're going to explore this. How many of you have already heard this statistic before? How many of you would say you've heard more about the buy local movement in the last 5 years? Whether it's food or anything else, okay, or shopping locally. So this really caught my eye, and this is the point at which I decided to start researching my economics and really understanding how economics works. So who are we today? We've grown from literally me knocking on doors, Monty's La Casa Vieja, and Changing Hands Bookstore, and a handful of other businesses, to, this slide is a little old, we had 82 businesses join just last month, so we're right at 2,200 businesses. And I'm going to underscore here for you, those are businesses of all sizes. And I'll describe to you in a little bit here the difference between small and local business. We are a local business coalition, and there is a difference between the two. We are the largest local business coalition in North America. We work on a lot of different areas that aren't really obvious on the surface. On the one hand, we're working on economic development. We also have a program to encourage in-state tourism. Currently, Arizonans spend about $6.5 billion a year vacationing in California, and we have a set goal of trying to redirect at least 10% of that into other Arizona communities. We are working on procurement, which I'll talk to you a little bit here. We are working on e-fairness. There's a lot of different areas. We actually just launched Fuerza Local, which is our Spanish language initiative geared at Spanish preferred business owners. So we have an online directory with all of these businesses. We have tools and resources for those businesses. The last I checked, which was just last week, we had an average of about 38,000 searches. That's not hits to our website, that's people visiting our website to search for a local business. The average length of time someone stays on our site is 3.5 minutes, which is pretty much higher than average. We obviously are a buy local campaign. We have a lot of programs, including National Independence Week. We're right in the middle of National Buy Local Month right now to encourage people to have a relationship with the small and local businesses in their community. On the technical side, if anyone's curious, when we started, I formed a 501c6, which is a dues-driven membership organization with the ability to lobby. Then we came along in 2009 and added C3 status, which means we're also in tandem a charitable organization working on economic development. I joke, you know, my background is being an entrepreneur. I have a small record store. So transitioning into being an executive director has sometimes been comical, sometimes it's been painful. And, you know, so I thought to myself, how funny the IRS decides, let's give record store lady let's give her 2 nonprofits. So I have 2 boards, 2 strategic planning sessions every year, 2 checkbooks, etc. But it's worked out very well for us. I recommend it to everyone. We are an advocacy group working on long-term economic development. None of these things are going to happen overnight. Ultimately, we're building civic pride, and we're changing the way people think about the way they spend their money. Our number 1 power that we have is our spending power. And most of us don't think about the way we spend our money. We're focused on economic sustainability. I like pointing this out because when you use the word sustainability, and everybody uses it, generally you start thinking about the environment right away. This conversation is about economic sustainability, and I would argue this country is on the same crash course economically as we are environmentally. And so it's important that we learn to have conversations around what is this mysterious the economy. I think we tend to think that the economy is something far away that someone else is going to fix, when in reality we are the economy. And the last thing I want to point out is that we're focused on business-to-business interaction and growing deep wealth within the region. That means we're focused on making sure that our business community is hiring local talent, that we're keeping those dollars recirculating in the community as much as we possibly can. So let's talk about the definitions of how we look at small versus local. Small businesses are incredibly important. It's the theme of the evening. I'm a small business owner. I believe strongly in the power of small business. They cultivate a pedestrian-friendly, walkable areas. They make you feel a sense of place. You like walking into the small restaurant where you know the owner, you know their name. These are small wonders, and they're vital to economic competitiveness. They really are. And one of the things I want to emphasize today is the relationship between small business and attracting big business. Every great community has small and large side by side, but if you focus on the large without focusing on what I call the fine grain, then you become imbalanced. And it's important that we find ways to focus on both of them. But for the purpose of tonight's economic discussion, I want to define local business for you. The way we have defined local business for all of our economic studies is the owner needs to live here in Arizona at least 9 months out of the year. The business must be privately held and not publicly traded. So the ownership and the dollars, when you follow the money trail, stays right here in Arizona. The majority of the business needs to be done here in Arizona, and the business needs to be unique to Arizona. So I'm going to pause and name some really large local businesses that are right here in Arizona. First one that comes to my mind is Hickman's, Shamrock, Harkins Theaters, Bash's, Hensley, Moving Forward, GoDaddy, Infusionsoft. These are locally owned businesses. They are. How many? Half of them. Great. Yeah, I know. I just did the Hickman's tour, which is fascinating, by the way. So I like to point this out because often it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine when I say I'm about local economies or local business. People go, "Oh, those mom and pops, that's cute," and it's dismissed. It needs to be focused on, and I'm going to talk to you about why. There's so much going on that we are just simply not paying attention to. Is anybody here familiar with this term, economic gardening? It was created in Colorado, essentially, about 10 years ago. And it's really a new form of economic development. It really is. It's changing the way we think about doing economic development and the way we grow jobs. Economic gardening is focusing on your existing assets and growing them, investing in them, helping them take root and nurture and grow from where you are, as opposed to focusing on attracting. Attraction is obviously a very big part of economic development, but if we said economic development was a 5-pointed star, incubators, startups, business retention, business expansion, and business attraction, by and large, most economic developers are focused mostly on attraction. I would argue those other 4 are a very, very important part of the mix. and we need to have a blend. Every community has to find their own blend. There is no set way that we should be doing economic development. But without focusing on the small at the same time, we run the risk of building communities that don't have a strong sense of place or loyalty. And there's a lot of detrimental economic impacts because of that. So I'm going to give you a couple of different examples. This one is a great example of economic gardening. Le Grand Orange it's in the complex at 40th Street in Campbell. It started, a young couple moved in and they took over an old wine bar. How many of you have been there? Either Postino or Le Grand Orange. Okay. So I use this as a great example. This number is surely more today. That's measuring the 5 businesses they've started. I like to jokingly say when I grew up, Arcadia was a high school, not a neighborhood. Nobody knew what Arcadia was. Right now you can't buy a home within 10 miles of these guys without somebody saying, oh, it's right next to Arcadia. The neighborhood next door renamed themselves to Arcadia Light. I kid you not. This is the power of what these businesses have done, right? All the property values increased all around this area, and this was not a run-down area by any stretch, but it was certainly blighted. You know, they had a post office that was empty and other stores that were empty. So I took this in front of the Phoenix City Council because they were focused again on big incentives for restaurants and retail. And I want to underscore there's a big difference between incentives for base industry sector and incentives for restaurants and retail. I just want to make sure that everybody's clear that I'm aware of the difference there. But they were focused on big incentives, and I said, okay, so let's look at this. What does this mean to you guys? It means $400,000 a year into city coffers, and all it cost you was a parking variance, right? They did not have to go to this couple and say, we're going to pay you to open a restaurant. What they need to do is streamline the process to make it easier for somebody to move into an old post office to take it over and open up a restaurant. Right? The regulations that are prohibitive to the small businesses, that's where we need to help. We don't need to be incentivizing these types of businesses with taxpayer dollars. So I'm going to juxtapose that really quickly with Cabelas. How many of you are familiar with Cabelas? Okay. Most people mistakenly think that Cabelas as a company is in the business of outdoor wear, but they're actually not. They're in the business of subsidies. So Cabelas, they average $25 million per store in subsidies before they even open their doors. Average. Now, does anybody want to guess what they got out of Glendale? Anyone? Anyone? Nobody from Glendale here? $68 million. Wow. $68 million for one retailer, based on the promise of sales tax return that never came. Now, that deal included a tax abatement, a 10-year tax abatement. You can walk into Cabelas today and buy something and pay your sales tax, and they don't have to pay it, and they get to keep it. They got free land, they got free construction, they got cash incentives for one retail location. Now, most people don't realize this goes on, but it's important that we understand the difference. Now, anybody in the room think that for a city, Cabelas is a better deal than Le Grand Orange? Right? You don't even have to be a business person to know. This is a better deal. This is a better investment. Let's encourage our entrepreneurs. Let's help them get their doors open and their cash registers ringing. So I put this slide in here to get people thinking about why people love Chicago so much. We all, who here knows someone from Chicago that won't stop telling you how great Chicago is? Right? There's always some angry woman pointing at her husband like this because she's just sick of hearing about it. So I started Local First Arizona while standing in line. This is fascinating to me. Standing in line next to a woman who was saying to me, boy, you guys sure have made a mess out here in Arizona. And I'm thinking, who's you guys? Who's this mysterious you guys? So then I thought to myself, maybe she hasn't lived here very long, right? So I said, well, how long have you lived here? She said, I don't know, about 13 years. She had never voted. She was not contributing to her charity. She wasn't volunteering, right? She was not connected to this place. So I started doing a little independent survey, and I started going out and saying, why do these people love Chicago so much? And you know what they told me? They told me the locally owned businesses. They didn't use those words. But they said those restaurants, those wine bars, those retailers, that storefront where I can walk and window shop, or my parents went there and my grandparents went there, I feel rooted to that community. Now here's an interesting phenomenon. That same person that experiences a local business economy can relocate to Arizona and throw that behavior out the window. And they end up shopping at big boxes and eating at big national chains. And they don't feel connected here, and they don't understand why. And I would argue there's something there. When I talk to people and they say, you know, I realized I was doing that and I started going to a local restaurant. Now my wife and I have a few local restaurants that we really enjoy. And you're right, it does make us feel some hometown pride. It makes us feel more connected to the place where we live. Now this is not about me bashing national chains. I'm trying to explain why this should be part of the economic development discussion at every level. So just a few simple statistics for you, close to exactly what Michael was talking about. Close to 95% of all the businesses in Arizona have fewer than 100 employees. $21 billion paid to the employees of small businesses in Arizona. This one really shocks people. If big business was laying off people at the same rate, if small business was laying off people at the same rate as big business, we'd have 950,000 fewer jobs in America today. Now, there's a lot of common misperception that it's really a hard time for the little guys, and it is. But guess what? It's a hard time for everybody. It's not disproportionate. It's just that there's so many little guys, and we notice when one goes out in our neighborhood. But we've lost a lot of big guys in this economy as well. Nobody is safe from this. But why? Let's think even further on this. In America, we know that job creation is coming from two distinct areas. It is coming from small business startups, and it is coming from small and mid-sized business expansion. And you can pretty much check any periodical for the last 10 years, and it will tell you that those are the two areas where job creation is occurring. Now, there's a lot of back and forth of I stole your jobs from Texas, and Texas stole my jobs from here, but that really is not job creation overall. So why do we think that big business hasn't been creating jobs? I submit to you it's because they're creating jobs in other countries, right? Right, and there's a lot of that going on to the tune of hundreds of thousands of jobs. So I use this slide, and I want to say I am not picking on Starbucks. I just use them as an example because when I talk about dollars recirculating the economy, I think a lot of people nod, but they really don't understand what I mean. So I created this slide to explain what I'm talking about. So this represents 15 Starbucks locations, right? We have a lot of them here in the Valley. And this represents 15 independent coffee houses, some of them right here in Maricopa. So the first thing people think, okay, well, Starbucks brings us jobs, and they absolutely do. They absolutely do, and they pay their taxes. They absolutely do. They actually bring us pretty good jobs, okay? So, and that side over there, those guys, they bring us jobs and they pay their taxes. So at this point in time, everything's equal. So people are shrugging their shoulders saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, let's look at when you spend your money on a latte here, where it goes. How many accountants are employed here in Arizona because Starbucks does business here? Okay. How about graphic designers? How about web developers? Payroll service providers? Attorneys? I could go on. Stop me, right? You get the idea. Now, let's look over here. 15 accountants have a gig. 15 graphic designers had a client. 15 web developers had a client. 15 payroll service providers had a client, right? Those are secondary jobs, and I'll tell you, they don't count them often enough, especially in communities like Maricopa. When I go out and I do a lot of talking in rural communities, secondary jobs are critical. They are critical. How are we going to get more people living here full-time, working here full-time, if those service-providing jobs aren't in full gear, okay? So now let's even talk about tertiary jobs, because it trickles right on down. Let's talk about the janitorial supply or cleaning company that is in business that cleans the accounting firm once a week, and the accounting firm is only there because they have local businesses that have hired them. So I'm going to pause and tell you a quick story. I just gave a talk to a group of graphic designers, and everyone in the room had fewer than 5 employees, and it was like a coalition. They had formed of graphic designers. And before I even got started, I talked to them. How many of them I said, how many of you are doing better today than you were 5 years ago? No one raised their hand. A room full of graphic designers, all of their business was down. And then we talked a little bit about their own buying habits, and most of them said, well, yeah, you know, I mostly shop at national chains. That's just kind of how my lifestyle is. And we had a real open, honest conversation about where their money was going. And then I said, I want you guys to really think about this. This is an interesting strategy you have. You're spending all of your money with companies that will never hire you. Pretty much, you're not going to convince Target they need a new logo. Not going to happen. Right? So, not only are you spending money with companies that will never hire you, those companies would love to put out of business all the companies that may actually hire you. So you are choosing to eliminate your own client base with your spending. And boy, do the light bulbs start going off. Because we don't think about this stuff, right? It's just not on the surface. And the advertising every day tells us the one thing that matters is that we buy it cheap. We're buying ourselves broke. So I think that this is really important that we look at this on a national scale, right? America was strongest for the couple of decades right after World War II. And this new model that's come in, has actually eliminated and siphoned jobs right out of the community, and we all think we're saving money. We're high on how much money we're saving, right? That's not how it works, unfortunately. We can prove through economic studies, and we have done so, that for every 2 jobs a big box retailer brings to a community, 3 local jobs will be lost as a direct result of a local business closing down. So clearly, I would argue that's not economic development, but we can even say that's fine, that's markets, that's how it goes. But we sure shouldn't be paying those companies to do that to our communities. That's where I draw the line. If we're going to bring them in and they want to come in, then we need to prepare. How are we going to adjust for the number of jobs that we might lose? But I question the logic of incentivizing that ratio. So in order to prove what we're talking about, I did an economic study in 2008 looking at the state of Arizona's office supply contract. I thought, here's something very vanilla everybody can relate to, and we went in and we compared 3 key businesses, and we hypothetically applied the $5 million contract to all 3. First, we used Whist Office Products, which is a 3rd-generation company based in Tempe. Second, we used Office Max, which is obviously a big national, but they do have a regional distribution center in Arizona. And third, we used Staples, which I'll show you in a minute. Staples is a big national, obviously, but they didn't have a regional distribution center in Arizona. These pie charts demonstrate how much money stays and recirculates and creates additional jobs. Had we spent the $5 million with Whist, 33.4% would have stayed. Instead, we went with Office Max, and 11.6% stayed. So I want to show you the methodology. This is really critical that we understand this. I call it good jobs versus poor. So the first thing is Whist, 3rd-generation Arizona company, they have 100% full-time employees with benefits. Okay, so they pretty much take care of their own. Staples and Office Max have brought Arizona 62 and 63% part-time employees with no benefits. Now, those employees with no benefits, they end up on the state health care program, right? So who is paying for their health care? We are. The people of Arizona are subsidizing the health care for those 2 companies. Okay, so right there, the imagined cost savings begins to erode. The second thing we looked at was charitable contributions. Whist gives $35,000 a year to Arizona charities and has done so every year for the last 10 years and can prove it. Staples and Office Max couldn't come up with any examples of charitable contributions at all. The third is second-tier jobs, which is what I explained to you before in the Starbucks example. Whist does business with Arizona. They have local accountants, graphic designers, web developers, payroll service providers, attorneys, and the list goes on and on and on. Staples and Office Max do not do any business here in Arizona. So this is what the pie chart looks like when you spend $5 million with each one of those companies. This sliver right here represents the clerks that they have in their stores and the taxes that they pay and else. So we spent, here's the sad end to this tale, is in 2009, the Office Max contract expired. This is over a year after we completed this study. And Staples came in and undercut them by a relatively small amount of money, and we awarded that contract to Staples. So we spent $5 million with a company that packs and processes our orders in Los Angeles and ships them here via FedEx. Not one Arizona job created. And I think that that's not a smart way for us to spend money. We can clearly see it was not a cost savings. We didn't save any money. If you measure it over time, there's a lot of leakage. Micah mentioned the leakage. The leakage is what's really important that we understand here. So, we have been trying to change the way the state procures goods for the last 4 years. When I say we, I mean Local First Arizona. Arizona is one of only 3 remaining states in the union that does not acknowledge that a local business does more for the local economy. We simply mandate low bid wins. That is not a smart way to do business. Okay, we're starting to see some of the cities break away and start to not buy off the state contracts because it's frankly not healthy for our communities. Mesa has really been leading the way, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what the city of Phoenix has been doing as well. So essentially, the old model of economic development was let's all run after the global, and we'll pit one city against another, and we'll see who we can get, and we'll incentivize and subsidize, and well, you local guys, you can just sort of hang on for dear life. That was kind of the old model. We're advocating that we flip that around. And I'm not saying we should spend 100% on local, because that wouldn't work either. I like to say we're local first Arizona, not local only Arizona, and not local always Arizona. But if we flip this a little bit and we have more attention on the local, and we build a healthy local economy, and our entrepreneurs are thriving, and we have civic pride like crazy, and people love living here, guess what? Those global businesses will come, and we might not have to pay them to come. So I want to give you a couple of examples. This is our next economic study that we did. We looked at the purchasing power for SCF Arizona. SCF Arizona is the state's largest workers' compensation insurance company, and they make it their mission to buy locally. They sourced 82% of their goods and services locally in 2009. In 2010, we came in and looked through all of their books, and we said, well, what does that mean? And there were 2 key things that came from this study. Again, they sourced 82% of their goods and services locally. Two key things. Number one, they spent $100 million, but it had a $500 million impact on Arizona by the time those dollars stayed and recirculated. The next key indicator that I think this is just so important, they directly employ 518 people. That's how many people say, I work for SCF Arizona. But because of the way they award their contracts, they indirectly support 3,600 jobs. Those are secondary and tertiary jobs. 3,600 jobs are fully reliant on SCF Arizona. And those jobs are in manufacturing, medical supplies, and the list goes on and on and on. So we've been able to take this study out and get the attention of a lot of Arizona's other big companies. All right, APS read this study. I met with them several times. They have committed to shifting 5% of their spending every year going forward. They will find 5% more ways to spend locally. We're talking to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona, talking to SRP. These are big companies. The local guys are already on board. So your companies like GoDaddy already sources a ton locally. Infusionsoft already, they source a ton locally. So it's important that we start to get all of our companies here facing in the same direction and understanding how important this is to economic development. On the consumer side, we developed this campaign, and again, this is really unique and interesting. One of my colleagues in Grand Rapids, Michigan did a study 2 years ago, wondering, hypothetically, what if everybody in a community the size of Tucson agreed to shift 10% of their spending, just 10% of their spending from a national to a local? And what they discovered is 3 things. One, it would create $130 million new dollars recirculating in that community. 2, it would create 1,600 brand new jobs. And 3, it would create $52 million in new local wages. That's for a 10% shift. That's a shift, not just saying I spend 10% locally. That means if you spend 20% locally today, I want you to spend 30% tomorrow. And there's a million ways that folks can do that. So we've created a website that sits at this domain here, shiftarizona.com. And people can go and they can enter that they live in Maricopa. It will automatically know the population of Maricopa. You can enter your monthly expenditures, and it will calculate for you how much you're personally going to recirculate for things like parks and libraries and fire departments. So on that website, we've had $68 million pledged in the time that it's been up, which is just under 18 months. And what's neat is we have a leaderboard. And what I mean by that is we base it on the percentage of population. I didn't want to just do it on the percent shifted, because then Phoenix would win and everybody would hate Phoenix even more than they already do. So we created it based on the percentage of population. So actually Springerville was our #1 shifting community for a very long time, and they are very proud of that. Phoenix was actually 13th. So it's a fun way that we started to engage the public and give them easy answers. So I'm going to share a success story of, how am I doing on time? Okay. A success story we recently had with procurement with the city of Phoenix. So again, we keep hitting roadblocks on changing the way the state does their contracts. And I would like to thank Representative Pratt for his ongoing support. He has been very supportive in this, so thank you for that. But we have been unable to get it through. Meantime, if nothing else, I have earned a reputation of being persistent, and I just kept knocking on doors. And I found a solution in San Diego. San Diego had the same problem, albeit about 10 years ago. And they changed the procedure at the city level instead of changing the law. So we essentially found a way for the city of Phoenix to go around that law by simply changing the procedure. I'll explain. So the old model used to be any contract worth $5,000 used to have to go out to a full open public bid. And again, we don't care where you're from, we don't care how many jobs you bring or if they're quality jobs, we just want the cheapest price. That was the way we were doing business. We raised that threshold from $5,000 to $50,000, and now staff has been retrained, and for those contracts under $50,000, they go to a database that's populated only with Arizona companies. They get 3 bids, they go with the lowest, and they're done. So it's still a competitive bidding process. It is not a preference. It is just a change in the procedure. Now, the city of Phoenix believes, they've estimated they're going to do an additional $18 to $20 million a year to start in additional new local business with this small shift. Now, the mayor of Phoenix has reached out, and he's working with tons of other communities, and he wants it to be a regional database. He doesn't want it to just be unique to Phoenix. He wants everybody's businesses in there, and he wants to give the car keys, so to speak, to every economic development and finance department so that they can find other Arizona companies. And I've been down working in Pima County as well, and Pima County has agreed that they will look at Pima County first and statewide second before they look elsewhere. So we could really start to make some traction in doing business within Arizona if we can continue on this path. So I just want to share this with you. A lot of times when I talk to folks who aren't connected to economic development and who aren't connected to, they're not thinking about the jobs in their community. All the people in the room here really probably have a pretty good grasp of that. But I like to use this as an example to get folks thinking. Let's say we've got a Little League mom who goes out week after week after week and she buys the team snacks at Costco. She believes she's saving money, she's doing the right thing, doesn't really think about it much. All of her money is going into Costco. All of the moms get together at the end of the year to have the year-end party for the kids. And all the moms have been spending all of their money on the team snacks at Costco. Well, at the end of the year party, they need somebody to donate a ton of food. All the kids, for the big party, we need some donated food. Do you think they're going to be able to go back to Costco and ask for that donation? What do you think they're going to do? They're going to go knock on Eddie Bash's door is what's going to happen, okay, if it's food related. And so I would argue that that's a broken social contract. We simply cannot continue to have our cake and eat it too. We can't spend with companies that don't support our communities and expect that the community is still going to be supported by businesses that are here, because they go away. If we don't support them, we almost lost Bash's. Bash's has given, no matter how you feel about the company, they have given over $100 million to Arizona charities, and they can prove it, okay? And when you think about the subsidies that are being given away, you know, just think for one moment about the Basha family in Arizona since the 20s. How many kids in that family are in the business? How many of them own property here? So Bash's is paying their sales tax, their property tax, their income tax, tax. They never got a single incentive. And all that money they paid into the coffers, and our city governments turn around and give it to Walmart to come in and put Bashas' out of business. Now that is not a free market. It has nothing to do with free markets. And I'll have people shrug at me and say, well, Walmart sells it cheaper, what do you want me to do? Well, if Bashas' was on a level playing field, I would argue that the locals can compete. I would argue that the locals can compete. And there are people who don't believe me on that, but I will tell you, I have a record store full of CDs that are cheaper than Best Buy. And that's just the reality. So I want to put a, this is a great example. I like to give people a takeaway so they can think about prioritizing. So I'm going to put in order, if you had to buy a faucet tomorrow, the most economic impact to the least economic impact. There's 5 levels, and I'm going to put them in order for you. The best thing you can do is to go out and buy a faucet that's American made at an independent hardware store. That's the most economic power, impact that you can put into the community, and there still are local hardware guys. What's that? Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, well, Ace is a franchise. I'm getting there. Second on the list is going to be True Value.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Next on the list, and these are tightly knit up at the top. 1, 2, 3. These are your best choices, right? And this is my talk even when you're not in the room, I promise you. True Value and Ace are right up here at the top. Those businesses have local ownership. They have somebody who's in the community, who I guarantee you gives to the community. You can almost find a Little League plaque on the wall in every Ace. They are rooted in the community, okay? And they may not be hiring a local graphic designer anytime soon, but that's okay. They carry tons of American-made products. They're a great store. Next drops significantly down on the list, way down on the list, is going to be a Home Depot or a Lowe's. You know that for every $100 you spend in a Home Depot or a Lowe's, only $13 is going to stay in the community. And you probably subsidized them to get into your community for that service, right? You're with your taxpayer dollars. Now we're going to the bottom of the list, the absolute, you're thinking, what's worse? Going online and buying that faucet without even paying your sales tax. Okay, and people think they're smart. I had a woman, she was telling me how smart she was. She had done all of her holiday shopping online and saved all that in sales tax. Now, you may think I have a really big mouth, and I do, but I wasn't going to say anything, I swear. She's bragging about how smart she is. I was minding my own business. Then it became apparent that her husband was a firefighter. And I was like, all right, that's it. I can't sit still. I said, lady, listen to me. I said, what are you doing? What kind of strategy is this? You're refusing to pay into the coffers that actually fund your husband's salary? Aren't they laying off firefighters right about now? Well, she turned pale. Why? She never thought about it. It's not that she didn't care. It really isn't. It's that we are detached from where it goes. We talk about tax. Tax is just a lightning rod issue. I can't tell you how many people say they don't want to pay their sales tax because they pay their tax at the end of the year. And I try to explain that's your federal income tax. There's this thing called a war going on that you're paying for there. Sales tax goes for your trash collection. Helping folks understand the difference between where their different taxes go. So we have worked on e-fairness. Again, I believe that Amazon should be collecting the same sales tax as the rest of the retailers throughout Arizona, the ones who have bricks and mortar or not. And they are going to be starting to collect in February of next year. So regional thinking does create new dollars for all. I do think that we are in this boat together and we need to link arms and figure it out. I have one last story I want to leave with you that I thought was really funny and is very relevant to Maricopa. I had a gentleman come up to me, he actually kind of ran up to me, he's very excited. And he said, you know, I heard you talk and you really changed my way of thinking. I live in Maricopa, he said, and every year I buy my tires and my wife's tires at Costco in Phoenix. And I started, after hearing you talk, I started thinking, gosh, my town, Maricopa, really could use that sales tax. Why wasn't I thinking about it, you know? And so this is the best part. So we went, he even had a neighbor, by the way. His neighbor owned a tire shop right here in town. So we went into his neighbor's tire shop and he said, hey Ray, I'm here to buy my tires this year, but you're going to have to match Costco's price. Well, Ray got a big smile on his face and he said, I'm cheaper than Costco every day, but I'd be happy to match their price. Right? So the point here is that we have forgotten to shop around. There was was a study that just came out of independent pharmacies. They compared Walgreens, Walmart, CVS, and an independent pharmacy in 15 different communities across the country, and the independent guy came in cheapest 40% of the time. Now that's worth shopping around, right? So think about this. When you go out and you're getting pummeled with advertising all the time, maybe they're not the cheapest. Maybe they are sometimes, but maybe not always. And if you can just find 10% to shift, who can shift 10%? 10%, right? We can do it. We can go find the ace guy, for sure. All right, now I'm going to open it up to Q&A. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, we got enough time for maybe 2 or 3 questions for fresh up on the number.
Okay, you got it. Anybody? How many people learned something totally new? Oh, great. Fantastic. Great. Yes, sir.
Okay, so, you know, the reality of it is, I've been here since 2005, there are still some businesses that we do not have.
Of course.
So what would you recommend as me, a Maricopa resident, I want to go buy something that's not available in Maricopa?
Mm-hmm.
How is the best impact, you know, would we go to Chandler and buy from the local guy versus the big box, or what are you suggesting?
So the question, he asked me to repeat the question. The question is, as a Maricopa resident, there are just simply things that you cannot find here to buy. What would be the next best substitute? I think the next best substitute is going local in one of the neighboring communities. That would be my first choice. Certainly better than going online, and still better than going to a big box, in my opinion. And of course, rural communities do deal with this, not that I'm calling you a rural community, but I hear this around the state a lot, is what can we do? And again, this is not an all or nothing proposition. And the goal here is to not make anybody feel badly about going to big boxes. That is not my goal. My goal is to help folks understand when you have opportunity, like the tire guy, like the auto mechanic, like the person who cuts your hair, like a Harkins Theater, whatever it might be, that you can do local, do what you can, and then do the best you can with everything else. Mostly this is about being aware of where your money is going. And I like to tell people, even standing in a Walmart, you can still choose Hickman's eggs, and it still makes a positive impact on America. Anybody else?
Yeah, with the fiscal cliff looming, what's your perception on how new tax rates are going to affect local small business? Higher tax rates.
Right. You know, I honestly do not know. And I've been going out and interviewing and talking to people about the healthcare issue and the higher tax rate issue. And we're honestly just going to have to see how that plays out. I think it's going to be painful in the short term, but I think in the long term it might be okay. But I am definitely not going to call that one. That is tough. That is a really tough situation all the way around. Yes?
One more, you were saying that the city of Phoenix draws off of a database of local and state companies. Is that a specific registration process, or do they just go to the Corporation Commission and say, give us a list?
It's a new vendor certification process, and if anybody here is interested, just email me and I can send you a link to that. Or if you want to call the finance department and talk to Jackie Johnson, she's spearheading that. So you just email me directly and I can send that to you, and I can guarantee that the mayor will open up the doors if anybody here would like access to that list to source goods and services. For sure. And I also just want to, I'm going to hand it back to Micah, and I want to give him a shout out. The entire team here in Maricopa, in my opinion, when I look at the small business development programs, tools, and resources that you have going on, it's very impressive. I know that you're an expert in this area, and I've known Micah since he was in Tempe, but I think it's really important that those programs and services get promoted and that everybody's talking about it, and I know they have the support of mayor and council, and you guys are an excellent, outstanding team, so I just want to, kudos to you for all that you're doing. It's greatly appreciated. So thank you for that.